سڵاوەڕێز بنێرێت کورد کانال ئەس فایزە نۆزاد لە شارێ ڤانکوور لە وڵاتە کانادای 25 گەلاوێژی و 78مین ساڵڕۆژە دامەزرانە حیزب دێموکراتە کوردستانê لە هەموویان پیرۆزبای دەکەم. میوانی me یە ئەوڕۆ بەڕێز تام کمیچ پارلەمانتارە کانادایê û dûstekî nêzîkê Kurdan e. Hêjara me yê ewro ser 25 gelavějê pisyara Kurdê li Rojhilatê û pisyara şoreşa jîna Emînî de bî. Spas.
I just want to thank you before we start that you were able to come and join us today, and we thank you that you're a friend of Kurds and all the contributions you've done to our community all up until now.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to do it.
Thank you. For the next little while, I'm just going to ask you a few questions, and we're going to go from there. Okay. So on the occasion of 78th anniversary of the Kurdistan Democratic Movement and the Democratic Party of Iranian Kurdistan, as a Friends of the Kurd, do you have a message for the people of Kurdistan?
Yes, I think people of Kurdistan should be really proud of the diaspora community outside of Kurdistan, whichever part of Kurdistan you're from, whether it's Rojhilat, Bashur, Bakur, or Rojava. There's an entire community of Kurds all across the world who are making a contribution to restoring the freedom that Kurdish people deserve. They're currently occupied by different powers. And then there's a lot of people out there very active and advocating both for basic human rights, equality of women, and advocating for the restoration of, someday, hopefully a Kurdish autonomous region, Kurdish republics, plural, it doesn't matter to me. But there are lots of, Western politicians who are helping the Kurdish people advocate for that in whatever country they find themselves in. So the people of Kurdistan should be proud of the diaspora community outside of Kurdistan who are advocating on their behalf to making sure that we have someday a restoration of Kurdistan.
All right, thank you for that. My next question for you is, 78 years ago, in the midst of a war-torn Middle East, President Qazi Mohammed and the short-lived Republic of Kurdistan advocated for freedom, modern democratic values, gender equality, and more. Women were encouraged to participate in public life, and girls were encouraged to go to school. From your perspective, would it be accurate to attribute the spread of the current movement for women life freedom to President Qazi Mohammed?
Yeah, I think you could say he kind of started, he put the seed, he planted the seed that was the Republic of Mahabad and the inspiration for a lot of people later on to keep advocating for the same ideals. And what you have now is since 1979, but also during the Shah's reign, I think it's an aberration of the history of the region, the Persian Empire before it, and those who came before didn't put down the freedoms of women. They really advocated for them. And Qazi Mohammed and others like him who have come down through the last few decades have been advocating for the same basic human rights to be respected. Man or woman, it didn't matter. You both should have an equal opportunity to live their lives the way they want to, develop their careers the way they want to. And, definitely, you can always say that, he planted the seed that's germinating today. And I think we're getting closer and closer to the moment where we'll see a restoration and of a Kurdistan of some sort, and at least more autonomy, especially for those Kurds who find themselves in Rojhilat.
Great. My next question is, given that Canada and its federal system serves as a model for multinational countries like Iran, do you believe that a federal system could effectively foster and safeguard democracy in nations such as Iran?
I think it could. We have a confederate system in Canada, which means our confederation is composed of equal provinces. The provinces are not parented by the federal government. The federal government is not supposed to tell them what to do. It's not perfect. Canada is not perfect. We're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. We're always trying to make a better country, but it is a model that others can use. The problem with our model is you can't have it with the mullahs of Qom, which are still dictating to people how they can dress. They're dictating to people what faith they're supposed to have. They're dictating to people where they're supposed to work. Mass conscription is just a regular thing people go to. You can't give your kids a Kurdish name. You can't send your kids to Kurdish language education. It doesn't work when you don't allow people their basic rights. But in the future, when there is a free Iran, definitely adopting a Canadian Confederation model would serve the people of Iran, especially, I think, a lot of good.
I hope so. One day.
I hope so too, one day.
As you know, we have this current movement going on, Jinjan Azadi, and I just wanted to hear your opinions and what you have done or you want to do and what we can do next.
If Westerners, the people who live in Western countries finally took interest in the Middle East and kind of found out that there's this terrible regime called the Islamic Republic of Iran, where it is normal for a woman to be randomly picked up by a bunch of morality policemen, picked on only because she is not wearing the hijab properly. And in Gina's case, as soon as they saw the hometown that she came from on her identity card, and it was Sakuz, they knew that she was Kurdish as well. And so they picked her up, beat her to death, and killed her, and then tried to deny it for many months. And then the whole revolution kind of kicked off in the Kurdish regions, in Rojhelat first, and then spread throughout the whole country, really led by women, and then others, men, who then joined it to like push back against the repression of the Iranian regime. And, you know, I was the first member of parliament in Canada to mention her by her Kurdish name in the Canadian parliament, because for the longest time we were using her Persian name. And the Canadian government has been slow. It took the Canadian government almost 2 months to react by imposing actual sanctions. And now, like, I think a lot of people who are involved or interested in politics actually know what Jinjian Azadi means, or they've heard it several times. Women Like Freedom. WLF is now an acronym that a lot of organizations move. I have been to a lot of protests, a lot of rallies. I know you have as well. I've been to a lot of now commemorative plates, like they have a street name faceplate that's been put down on the street where the Iranian embassy in Ottawa was shut down back in, well, that's been about almost 15 years now. That was shut down by previous conservative government. So now it has Gina Masa Amini street sign that's right there where the Iranian embassy used to be. There's a lot more that we can do, listing the IRGC as a terror group as one, delegitimizing the regime. The conservatives in opposition, despite being in opposition, we were the ones that moved a successful motion calling for the Canadian government to call for the United Nations to remove Iran on they were on the UN Status of Women Commission, and they were actually on an executive position. So we were successful in actually getting them removed from that position, because once we passed the motion, then our government called for it, and other governments started to call for it too. So things to come to Canada, hide their money, hide their people, hide their kids here by making them go to universities and start businesses. Those are all the next steps that we should be doing, because the people of Iran, the people of Kurdish murderers and rapists, they don't deserve those opportunities. They should be stuck in a country where they make people's lives miserable, so those people can hold them accountable. And that's my hope, that the Jinjian Azadi movement, they want to be their representatives.
So my last question for you is, since the inception of the Jina movement, Canadians of both Kurdish and Iranian heritage have a terrorist organization. Unfortunately, this has not been acted upon. From your perspective, what factors might underlie the decision of Canadian government to refrain from acknowledging the valid request?
So that one is kind of a still like tough issue for parliamentarians to accept, because we passed a motion back in 2018. Parliament unanimously passed this motion to call on the government to list the IRGC or SEPA as a terrorist organization. Many parts of SEPA are already listed as terror groups, including the Quds militia, parts of their air force, and the different parts that conduct businesses. They're already listed as terror groups. The leaders of SEPA are listed as terrorists. So it's not as if we can't do it, and the Canadian government's been dragging its feet to actually list them as a terror group. And the only reason is purely political. There is no mechanical reason to do it. The United States government has already listed them as a terror organization. It was a good thing to do. We have many people who come from Iran originally, whether they're Baluchi, whether they're Kurdish, whether they're Azerbaijani or Persians, who hate the regime, want nothing to do with the regime, but they were conscripted by SEPA at some point, and they still want, be able to travel within Canada, and they have some basic rights. Many of them have become Canadian citizens. We can protect their rights as Canadian citizens while also listing probably one of the top 2 worst terrorist organizations in the world that does more to finance terror in other countries, finances the creation of new terrorist organizations all over the Middle East and in parts of Africa, and still tries and attempts to do things like, kidnap American citizens who are doing nothing more than advocating for their basic rights, or, organizing terror attacks in European cities. So there's ample evidence that IRGC still does it. There is no good reason why the Liberal government in Canada hasn't listed them as a terror group. And as a conservative, we're going to continue to call for them to be listed as a terror organization. It will be one of the very first things we would do as a conservative government, should we earn the right to govern in the future.
I hope so.
I hope so too.
Yeah. Well, that was all my questions. Thank you for taking the time to have an interview with me. If you have anything else to say.
Yeah, I do. On 70th anniversary, I just wanted to make sure that I wish everybody back in Kurdistan, especially in Rojhelat, Bistupenji, Gەلاوێژ, Piruzbit, just on behalf of the people of Canada and the Canadian Parliament, on this great 70th anniversary. It is a huge achievement, and I want to mark that.
Thank you for that.